This episode is brought to you by Camilla Najat with Exit Realty Metro.
Camilla Najat is an experienced real estate agent who prides herself in finding the perfect home for her clients. Camilla can help you with a comparative market analysis to help determine the value of your home if you're planning on selling, or help you determine the going rate for the neighborhood you're moving into. She can also work with you at your pace.
You can reach Camilla by calling 902-880-8429 or email camilla@exitmetro.ca.
Also, you can find her on Facebook at Camilla Najat, Exit Realty Metro. This is Matt Conrad.
And this is Mike Tobin.
Welcome to the Afternoon Pint.
Today's guests are Amanda and Kristen, co-hosts of the hugely popular podcast known as Momicide. In Momicide, Amanda and Kristen dive deep into some of the world's most intriguing cases with genuine insight, reaction, heart, and humor. Please check out a link on our podcast episode to visit their show. We also have Mike's partner, Andrea Roswell, take over the reins on Mike's hosting duties, along with a few interruptions from their beloved dog, Coco. Enjoy!
Cheers!
Cheers. Go.
Welcome to the Afternoon Pint. I'm Mike Tobin.
And I am Matt Conrad.
And today we have the beautiful Andrea. What's your last name?
Roswell.
Andrea Roswell. And she's going to be the co-host today. My partner. She's a tremendous fan of the guests that we have on today. But first, let's just quickly introduce our beer.
Yeah, so... well, you know what? Let's go with me first because yours is far more appropriately named.
Okay, so for our guests, which is, they may or may not do a podcast about murder.
That's right.
Yeah, called Momicide, and I'm drinking the Serial Killer
Stout
from Big Spruce.
Yeah,
I'm also wearing the hat.
Yes,
yeah,
that they gave you.
Very
Love
cool.
that.
Yeah.
Love that.
So, anyways, I'm going to pass it on to Andrea, and you're going to introduce our two guests today because you're a huge fan of the show.
And also just a shout out to Two Crows because I'm drinking their Space Words, which is, it is 11:47 in the morning and this is 10%. So here we go. Cheers to a
Cheers.
to a morning.
Cheers to that.
Yeah,
I'll enjoy my bubbly here because I do have to work later today.
exactly.
I'm Andrea, everybody. I'm Mike's better half, and I'm
Fact.
excited to be here. I've never been on the show before, and I have our guests here today, which I told Mike need to come on because they're amazing, and they have a podcast that a lot of you might know. It's called Momicide, a true crime podcast. They're local here in Nova Scotia, and I absolutely love their show. Funny story, I was listening to it while getting ready one day, and Mike came in. I said, "Oh my God, you have to have them on the show." And he said, "How can you listen to that stuff?"
It's a niche. It's a niche.
It is. So welcome to Amanda and Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
I actually love the name.
Thank you.
Because I'm two things. First of all, it's perfect. Obviously, it works in there so well, right? Obviously, with your situation and being mothers and it being about homicides, but also I'm a big fan of things that are really simple and yet no one has thought of yet.
Right.
Right.
Right? It's one of those things where it's
We
like
can thank Amanda for the name. She came up with that.
you just change,
Very
change
witty.
one letter in the word,
Yeah.
and it brings this whole other meaning. And it's like, and I sit there and I wonder sometimes, like, how is it we have billions of people on this earth, and we've had podcasts going for whatever 20 years more, whatever, and nobody's thought of Momicide yet.
And it's funny
brilliant.
because I still have the list on my phone from when we were just ballparking ideas to start the podcast and lists of names. And I remember with each name that I thought of, I would go and search and it would be already taken.
Right.
And then when I thought of the Momicide one, I looked it up. I'm like, it's not taken. And then we just decided to go with that one. But yeah, I like a good pun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. The episode I listened to, I will say, blew my mind.
Which episode?
So Ryan Waller.
Yes.
Okay.
So-
yeah.
Talk about a 1 in a million shots.
It's a crazy
Pardon
story.
the pun, but not
Yes.
really. But like, you know, just a crazy
I think that's
thing.
still one of our most listened to episodes.
Is it? Okay.
Oh, wow.
That I was like, phew.
It's funny how many people prefer the stories that they don't know. Like, because for me, I mean, I love it all, but the big names, I still want to listen to those. But so many people will message us and be like, oh my God, yay. Like, I'm so excited. We've never heard of this name before. And yeah, those episodes always seem to do very
Oh yeah, totally.
So, yeah.
And especially when there's like a shock factor, like
Right.
the episode.
Yeah, what I will say though, even you guys cover a lot of the big ones that a lot of us know and I've definitely heard of before, I'm familiar with, but when I listen to you guys do the show, you always add something that I didn't know. So there's always something in the episode that I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you can tell there's so much research and work that goes into all of your episodes.
We are very thorough.
Yes,
almost
you are.
to a fault sometimes, but yeah.
It's probably a diagnosis, but it works out.
Right.
How do you guys do your research?
So we'll usually start by just doing like a general Google search of the case. But I also we have a few subscriptions to different newspapers that will search to find articles that may have, just gotten lost. And then I still actually have my subscription to my university library account, which you can search pretty much anything and it will bring up audio files, newspaper articles, peer-reviewed articles, and all that stuff. So that's where I find a lot of my really good in-depth stuff. I think that's pretty much
just general like news articles from Google. Documentaries. We listen to a lot of podcasts to get other information. You'd be shocked how much people leave out on podcast episodes because I feel like they feel this need to condense the episode like under an hour, right? So they cut out so much of the story, but the information really is not hard to find, truthfully. We just, anything that we find interesting, we're like, let's just put it in there. Like, let's get the whole story. With that being said, some of the episodes turn out to be like 3 hours long. So it can be a lot sometimes.
I saw that.
But,
I think Casey Anthony or something like that.
yeah,
Two parts.
there's been a few.
Yeah.
Right?
There's been a few.
But there's a
really
lot of
good ones.
information to that. I mean, like there's been documentary upon documentary series and everything covered. There's a lot of information. So it makes sense to shorten that to like an hour or something is impossible.
right.
Yeah, that's what I like about it though, because there is so much more info on your guys' shows than I've heard, because I've heard like the condensed 30-minute version of it.
Yeah.
And listening to yours, I might have to listen to it in 2 parts over a couple of days, but I love it.
Yeah.
And
More is more, right?
yeah, absolutely. There's so much information in you guys. So how long does it take you to research or prepare for an episode?
Well, I mean, we're both very busy in general, so it does take us probably, longer than it should. But
In terms of actual time put in,
like, God, I would say at least for research, at least 12 hours.
Okay.
If it's like, sitting down and
Each.
only doing that. Yeah, each. I would say.
You guys put it like one in a month, is it?
Give or take. Yeah.
yeah, we try our best.
Yeah.
Sometimes there have been times where we put one out every 2 weeks when we're less busy, but
Yeah.
it usually works out to be once a month.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It makes sense given the amount of research that has to go into all
And
this.
when, there are some podcasts that, put out a 45-minute episode weekly or an hour episode every 2 weeks. And then when we release 2 or 3 hour episodes, we're sort of giving people enough content to listen to over a certain amount of time. And honestly, the heaviest piece is the editing, which takes a very, very, very long time, which again, I'm just very, very meticulous about editing and making sure that it sounds really professional, because I don't know about you guys, but if you pick up a podcast and you start to listen to it and it's like background noise and it doesn't sound, you can't really hear the people very well, then it sort of makes you not want to continue to listen to it.
Or like a lot of pauses. We're reading off a script on our phone that we write, so we like mess up words all the time. So she does all the editing. God love you. And yeah, people are like, "Oh my God, your episode sounds so good." I'm like, "You should hear what goes on behind the scenes. Like the bloopers that we have are like so funny."
Yeah, see, it's not like this show where it's just like we're just a bunch of
this
drunken
is
idiots.
very organic. Ours
Yes.
is much more scripted.
Well,
Yeah, conversational ones, it's the editing doesn't have to be as strict because it's just conversation, and if you mess up your words, you just continue talking.
Right.
Whereas we really want it to be very organized and to the point.
I should mention we have Coco here today too, another special guest, her dog.
Exactly, the dog's here.
Visiting everybody individually and trying to sit on their laps.
Tap
As they
dancing in the
talk.
background.
Okay.
This is like the brunch
Late
version.
morning.
Yeah. And the first time not at a pub or a bar. So what made you guys want to start this?
Yeah.
Like, what was your inspiration to starting this podcast? I know you guys did an intro episode. for the show, but just for those that don't know you guys or might not have listened yet.
So we went to high school together, and we weren't really, like hangout friends, but we always had each other on social media. And we would, each of us would share like a story in our Instagram story or on our Facebooks. And we both sort of started to pick up on the fact that we both really liked true crime. And I think it started with us just being like, hey girl, like we should start a podcast, haha, kind of thing.
Isn't that how all podcasts start though? Because that's how ours started.
Yeah.
Maybe not the hey girl, but maybe it was.
Hey girl.
Hey girl.
Hey girl.
And then I think, we started to, Kristen is a makeup artist, and she actually has done my makeup for most of my major life events. And so we started to get a little bit closer in our contact. And then one day we just took it seriously.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it, because it really was like, we're both huge true crime fans. We both love podcasting. And for me, I listen to podcasts in the morning getting ready, when I'm driving to work, when I'm cooking, like I love it. And anytime I would listen to an episode, I'd be like, this would be so cool to actually like sit down and do something like this. And yeah, we would just sort of be like, that would be awesome. And then one of us was like, let's do it. And I'm like, I don't know, like, yeah, maybe, haha. And then, yeah, it was pretty spontaneous, honestly.
It was like a DM that just led to, we didn't even have each other's phone numbers.
We started thinking of names, logos, and then we ordered got it down, and we were like, well, we gotta do it now.
How long have you guys been doing it now?
We're coming up on 2 years.
Yeah, it'll be 2 years
in February.
Yeah. So that's good. Yeah, because it looked like 2021 or something like that. Was
Yep, 2 years.
Yeah.
So
pretty crazy.
And you guys won a Coast Award, right?
We did.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations to that.
We were pretty excited about that. Which, because it's a voting thing, it's always pretty exciting when you know that there are people out there that listen, which to me, we do it. We really thoroughly enjoy everything. We enjoy the research rather, and we enjoy the conversation. I don't so much enjoy the editing, but it's a part of it. And so to know that there are people that actually go and they get excited when they see that we've posted an episode and they listen, like it just seems so weird to me. Like it's like we're just regular people. We're just doing it because we like it. But we get feedback sometimes, and this is my favorite piece of feedback, is people say, once they've started listening to our true crime podcast, they can't listen to other ones anymore because they've set a standard and they just get too picky, and they're like, no, this is not the way Amanda and Kristen do it. And that's my favorite compliment ever, because
I get that though.
Yeah. I listen to podcasts a little bit less now, but I think it's also because we've created exactly what we want to hear.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it is hard. Like, we wanted to find a balance of some conversation, but not too much. So we don't really talk about our lives very much. But we will have sidebars about the case and our opinions on the case. And a lot of conversational true crime podcasts, there's a lot of inside jokes, and there's a lot of banter back and forth that if you just clicked on an episode, you'd have no idea what they were talking about. And so we try to keep our intros very short, and we get right into it. And then at the end, we might talk a little bit about ourselves for the people that make it that far. And, and then you'll have your podcasts that are just information with no conversation, or it's too much conversation. And so we sort of created a balance. So for me, it's kind of hard now to listen to a podcast, because I'm like, I need a little bit more. And then I'm like, oh, I need a little bit less. Too much talking. So
a lot of those dramas often rely on like cliffhangers and stuff too. So you listen for 45 minutes and it's like,
yes.
And it's like, why don't you just give me the answer?
There is that too.
It's nice that your show's conclusive in every episode. So you get a fully fleshed out story. You can listen to it, and by the end of it, you know pretty much everything there is to know about that case.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because it seems like there's a lot of people that are doing that type of thing, because there's a huge demand for it.
Oh,
people
massive,
are just obsessed with it, right? My wife at one point was watching something where it was like a woman was just putting her makeup on and telling stories like on Instagram.
Yeah, probably Bailey Sarian.
Bailey Sarian. Yeah, maybe, it's a combination of two niches.
Exactly. Yeah. and I know I'm generalizing, obviously, but like, what is up with women being obsessed with killing people, or like the fact that other people kill people?
Right.
Is it us? Is it us?
Sorry
okay.
to break it to you.
It's actually you, man.
It's
Specifically,
just you.
Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, like, let's be honest, most of it, like, the victims are women, right? Like,
Right,
women
that's
are
true.
victimized.
That's true.
And just being a woman in society in general, you, from childhood onwards, you're kind of conditioned to, you know, you have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to, you know, look over your shoulder all the time. If you have a daughter, you have to teach her, you know, you have to be safe and blah, 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 right? So as a woman, we already have those expectations just being in the world in general, sadly. But with true crime, it feels more, I don't want to say relatable, because obviously we're not all out here getting murdered, but just, I don't know, like, just to pick up on things where it's like, okay, like, this is how we could be safer in society, right? Like, just things like that. I just find the stories interesting, truthfully honest.
I do
like,
too.
It's just like a therapeutic thing for me, as weird as that sounds. For most men, they're like, what do you mean therapy when like someone's talking about chopping somebody's head off? But I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. It's just like a very relaxing, enjoyable.
It's scary. I think, to piggyback on what you said, because women are, you know, they tend to be more vulnerable, and if you look the statistics up, it'll back it up that, you know, men murder women a lot.
Yes. Yeah. Men tend to be the bad guy like 90% of the time.
They tend to. And so I think it's interesting to, you know, first of all, just to know the crazy stuff that people do, because it just seems so far-fetched. And also just knowing how the mind works and how a psychopath happens. And that's just like, I'm very scientific, and Kristen is too. And so just learning about why people do what they do. Why does a serial killer become a serial killer?
The psychology. It's
Right.
very interesting.
That's what always interested me too. And I did a lot of my electives in my degree, my science degree, in abnormal psych and forensic psychology, because I've loved it since I was a kid. And I find it really fascinating. I think it's just trying to make sense or logic out of something that's so illogical,
Right.
is why people like to listen to it. I think that's why I like it, because it's just like, oh my gosh, like this happened. That's crazy. And
like,
I think,
how could somebody be this way?
right.
Like,
What happened to this person? What led up to it? Like, I like the clinical side of it too, and the autopsies and the science behind it all always really fascinated me. So that's the side that I'm really interested in.
If I can, like, you know, speak a little bit for my wife too, because my wife's a lot smarter than I am. So I think, like, whenever we're watching, like, even if it's just like, you know, fake murder mysteries, like movies and things like that, she's like 15 minutes in, it's like, it's that guy. And I'm like, just shut your brain off. Stop trying to figure it out.
We can't.
No, yeah, just go along for the ride. She's like, nope, I got to figure it out, right? And I'm like, all right, cool. And what determines whether she likes something or not is if she couldn't figure it out until the end, kind of thing. So, but I think she also likes that part of it, like the figuring out the puzzle, the pieces, putting the puzzle pieces together, things like that, the mystery. It does exercise your brain, obviously.
Yep.
So I think there's a little bit of that. Maybe, I don't know.
And it's also just because as a woman, and I think that this is part of the reason why so many women listen to true crime. I think it's because, you know, we could potentially have been the people that were murdered. And we obviously don't just cover women being murdered, but it is more common. And sort of just to know, like, what happened, XYZ, that led to this woman being in a position where she was murdered. And the more you know, the more you can protect yourselves. And so we will often share, you know, like, this is what we do to protect ourselves in our homes. And we have this camera and this alarm system, and carry coyote spray with you for the quote coyotes. And, you know, just, you know, vulnerable positions that women have gotten themselves in where they have been murdered. And we sort of talk about, like, hey, this is what you should not do.
Right.
Like, is how many women get kidnapped in parking lots at night. And just things like that. It's sort of just like, the more you know, the more you can protect yourself.
Because not every case is like, oh, the husband did it, right? Like, some of them are like, you know, she's walking down the street. And anything, like, just
he did not do it, spoiler.
Completely random, right?
And I think the random ones are fascinating too, because it's not that typical, you know, the husband did it situation. It's like she was leaving work, she walked to her car, or my fear, as you know, the dog is entertaining us here today. I walk her a lot in the woods, and I also carry coyote spray, and maybe a pocket knife. But you know, you do think of that stuff as a woman, and I think it's important to it starts when you're young. Yes. I have an almost 12-year-old daughter, and you know, we've had a lot of these talks, and from a very young age, we know to look over our shoulder, observe what's going on. So I think it is helpful to give you that tip of how to stay safe.
I always think about what it must be like from a man's perspective, where they don't have that same conditioning in society. Because I talk to my partner about it all the time, and I'm like, because I feel like most men are like, what's wrong with women where they're like so into this? Yeah. And I've had that conversation. I'm like, well, we have to be. And I'm like, you know, must be nice for you to never have to like question or worry about that. And he's like, yeah, like I've never ever, like that thought has never gone through my mind before.
Right.
Well, and that speaks to privilege, right? Like,
totally. Right. And it seems so crazy to him that we are actually like this, and this is something that we constantly have to think about. I mean, like, we're not scared to like walk down the street or anything, but it is something in the back of your head.
But it's interesting to me that you know, that's how we think, that's how we're programmed, because it is there in the back of your head. And we've all probably had at least one or multiple times where we felt unsafe in a situation, or out walking, or had an incident where we felt very vulnerable.
We did an episode, like a transgendered person who went from male to female. And one of the things they talked about was actually learning to be afraid for themselves. Like, kind of thing, like going from a male who it was never programmed into your head to, you know, I should be worried about walking in a parking garage by myself at night, to now actually thinking about that now. And I was even kind of like, ooh, like, I was kind of even like, see, this is the thing about privilege.
It is privilege.
It's not just because I'm privileged doesn't mean I'm bad.
No.
It just means I completely oblivious to what you guys have to go through on an everyday basis. Right. Yeah. So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So this is self-defense is what you're telling me.
It is partially self-defense.
It can be.
For sure. Yeah.
And how has it changed you guys? Just if it's okay, I can say you guys, I think you announced it on your page anyway. You guys are both expecting.
Yes.
Which congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Super excited for
Momicide
both
again.
you guys. I know. So how has it changed you as parents, like having this true crime passion, the podcast itself, the stories you listen to and research? How has it changed your parenting, or has it?
Ironically, we have boys.
Yes, we're both boy moms. So I feel like if we had daughters, it would be a million times worse.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like I've always been
I'm going to be the parent that has the sleepovers.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? And you just know, when you know what's out there, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but you just know how to protect your children better. And bad things happen to people of all genders and gender identities. And there are just bad people out there. So you sort of, you know, if for example, my husband took my son to the Moosehead game last night, and I'm like, not even for a millisecond are you to take your hand away from his hand. Because you just know that's all it takes is a split second. And so I'm definitely hyper aware. Like, I'm at the grocery store and my son's in the cart, and I just need to grab something off the shelf, and I have my hand on my son as I'm grabbing it off the shelf. And I think it just makes it so that you are constantly, I mean, as a woman as well, because I'm sure my husband isn't always thinking that way too, but I'm just aware of how children can be affected also by the things we talk about. We don't do kids very much because it's a hard thing to talk about, but you just are aware of the dangers, hyper aware, and you just sort of do everything you can to protect them.
It's interesting you mentioned sleepovers, because my wife and I have had this conversation a couple times where, like, you know, there's the people who allow their kids to go on sleepovers, and then there's people who are like, you can go and you can stay up late, but I'll pick you up at 11.
Right.
And obviously that's due to data showing that between like 11 and 6 a.m. is when higher probability of something happening to your kid kind of thing, right? So it's almost like sleepovers are modifying a little bit in today's world and things like that, you know, because it's about protecting your kid. And we don't do social media. Like, I have a 2-year-old, and his face doesn't get seen on
Yeah,
social media
my
at
son. I mean, for my private pages where I just have family and friends, my son's on there, but he doesn't touch the internet where everybody can see because it's just a AI now and just everything that's going on. It's a lot.
Like the weird things that like once you have a kid and stuff, like the things you read online now, and like I was reading something where like predators will like the face of your kid and they'll get a picture of it and they'll splice their face off and put it on a body of a kid that they already have, right?
Terrifying.
And
Scary.
it's like, whoa, like things like that, right? So we've just been hyper sensitive about social media and kids and consent.
Right.
That's really what another thing that comes down to it, right?
Yes.
I mean, I have a boy, you guys have boys, and we're trying to raise him to know about consent. And, if a family member's like, give me a kiss, and he says no, it's no.
That's okay.
No means no.
Yeah.
My son says, respect my words now.
Oh, I love that.
Which is amazing. So, yeah. And I think it's even more important, really, for us as mothers of boys to make sure that we're not raising the men that go on to do, I mean, God forbid, something super awful, but also just men that are aware and men that can stand up for the vulnerable people in society. And yeah, totally, consent is it's a very big topic in our house. And it does start with that. Like, hey, if you don't want to give grandma a hug, you don't have to give grandma a hug.
Exactly.
You just say no thank you. And so we started to teach him, like, if somebody's playing with him or tickling him, and he'll say no thank you, and if the person doesn't stop, he says, respect my words.
I love
awesome.
that.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah. Listen to me.
Yes.
That's awesome. How old is he?
He'll be 3 next month.
Wow.
Yeah, and he actually just said it to my dad the other day. And I was like, my chest just puffed up.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes. And my dad's like, oh, I will respect your words.
Yeah, but he's learning his boundaries, right?
Yes, exactly.
And what he, what's okay for him and what's not. And I think that's important.
Yeah. And I definitely grew up in situations where, with my own family, where I was put in really uncomfortable spots where I was giving someone a hug and they would do something a little uncomfortable. And you were just like, oh, no, you give them a hug. And that's something that we have to get kids out of too, because it's also a generational thing where
it is.
Our grandparents
things are so different nowadays with like the way things are.
Yeah.
100%.
And teaching my family, like, please don't guilt my child into hugging you if he doesn't want to hug you. Like, I have some family members that will like pretend to cry if my son doesn't want to hug them.
Basically emotional bribery, right?
Yeah. It's being a parent is it's a tough job.
It's the toughest job.
Hands
down.
It's tough because you're not just like worried about obviously, like, you want to raise a good human being. That's really what our job is, right? Is to raise a good human being. But then on top of it, you have generational gaps of knowledge where people seem to think like, oh, well, this was fine. This is how we did it. Like, everyone went to the grandparents, 30, 40 years ago and whatever, right? And it's like, but that's not, just because that's how it's always been doesn't mean that's how it always should be. Yeah,
you're educating the child, and then you also have to very awkwardly educate your own family about why you're not doing things a certain way, which is just awkward in itself. When you have to when I have to like tell my parents not to do something, it's like, wait,
like, don't kiss my kid on the head when it's RSV season.
Yes, please keep your germs away.
Right. Things like that, right? And that's just completely lost, right? But it's So going back, I guess, to the actual episodes, like, do you guys have one that like really stood out to you guys that was like your favorite? You were like really juicy. I mean, kind of
like one that we covered or one that we just know of.
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Or one that just sticks with you that you know.
Yeah.
One that we haven't covered yet that I think was one that really got me into true crime was the John Benet Ramsey case.
Oh yeah.
And I think part of it is because her murderer has never been found.
Yeah.
She was also murdered in her own house and found in her own house, and there's like a ransom note situation, and there's just all these theories about who did it and whether it was a family member or yada yada.
I don't know about
yada.
that. Where did that happen?
In the States. And she was like, do you remember, I don't know if they still have them, but do you remember in the grocery store they used to have those like
the tabloids,
like
the
magazines that would have like fake aliens on them and stuff like that. And she would always be on the cover because she was this little girl who was in pageants. And so she looked like she was like 12 years old, but she was like 4 or 5 with full face of makeup. And so also there's the layer of the fact that it was a white family. So obviously it was everywhere because when white people die, it's all over the news. And so I saw that. I would see it at the grocery store constantly, and my dad would sometimes talk about it. He listens to true crime as well. My dad does. He listens to he listens to it while he sleeps, which is not something that I do, but
I've done that.
I have nightmares.
Mind blown over here.
So I remember with that case just wanting to learn more about it. And then once I got old enough and the internet was a thing, I would listen to it, and I've listened to so many podcasts on it, and we eventually do want to get to it, but there's
a big one.
it's so detailed, and there's so many layers to it. And I think just the fact of not knowing who did it sort of just sticks with you.
Yeah. But that one does have a following, because like that comes up like almost every several years.
I mean, even recently it's been in the news because they were sending something away for
It was like DNA
a
or
DNA
something.
test,
Yeah.
which I don't even know how that's even able to be used at this point because it happened so long ago. But that's one of my I don't know how to word it. Like it's one of my
You're invested in
yes.
that
I don't want to
case.
say favorite because that's just a weird thing. To
Favorite
say.
sounds weird.
Yeah,
but
it does.
But I mean,
I find it the most
there's
interesting.
favorites, yes.
Yeah.
So what about ones that you've covered?
I was trying to think about this the other day. I still always just go back to the Picton case.
I was going to say that. So I'm
Robert
glad you said
Picton.
that.
That's mine too.
It's just because there's so many complex layers to it and
Right.
problems that happened in that case, and victims. There's so many victims too. But yeah, I would say.
For the guy that doesn't know a lot about this, like who is Robert Picton?
So Robert Picton is
Welcome to Momicide Podcast.
Yeah. Robert Willie.
Robert Willie Picton. Willie Picton was a pig farmer from British Columbia. And he had a very large, extensive farm that him and his brother owned, that a lot of bikers and Hells Angels and just really bad people would be on the farm constantly. And basically he would go down to...
She doesn't like Robert Picton either.
Yeah, we don't like
Coco.
Yeah. Coco doesn't like the dog.
So in British Columbia, in Vancouver, there is an area known as the Downtown East Side. And there's a lot of sex workers down there, a lot of poor people, a lot of drug addicts. And Robert Picton would go down there to pick up a victim, which would be a sex worker, and would take them back to his farm and murder them in a very horrific way and dispose of the body in various horrific manners.
And oftentimes it was an Indigenous woman
Yeah.
that he was murdered.
So there was a layer of Indigenous, victims and police mishandling and,
Police just not caring because it was Indigenous sex
Right, yeah,
workers.
it's like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Pass
these
it
women
off.
are missing, but
Right.
yeah.
And I think he ended up confessing to 49 victims.
Wow.
They ended up finding the remains of something like 32 victims on his farm or something. And some of these remains were just a fragment of bone. Is all they found of one person.
Right.
Because he would dismember them. He would let the pigs eat them. So that was like
that's a way of
another
getting rid of it.
yeah. And then he would sometimes put their bodies into like meat grinders. He would mix them into the meat that he was selling on the like just disgusting.
It's so awful.
Yeah, it's really bad, but interesting nonetheless.
It's
right?
it's very interesting,
Yeah.
but that's my case.
And we had a cool
that sticks
interview
with
on
me.
that.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, we had a pretty cool
Yeah.
interview for that episode too.
And the fact that, we got to interview an RCMP officer that worked on that case, which was pretty awesome.
Okay.
So if you want to listen to another
I'll go
one.
back. Yeah, I'll go back and listen to it.
That was a crazy moment to be interviewing someone who, sort of worked on a case that you're like, holy
Well,
shit.
he arrested Robert.
He arrested
Picton,
him.
So
yeah.
very close.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
And he
it
was just
cool.
very, very humble and he provided a lot of information and insight.
Yeah.
So that was really, really cool. The interview part. But yeah, it sort of sticks with you, especially like the more messed up it gets and the fact that it goes on for so long and you just think to yourself, like, how the hell did this guy murder people for years and years and years and years? And he wasn't careful.
No.
He wasn't trying to be, inconspicuous. He was very much just going and picking them up. He had there was even a layer of another woman who was a sex worker who was helping him to pick the other women up.
Right.
Like the story is so complex that it's amazing that it happened, and the fact that it happened in Canada, because honestly, most of the really, really messed up killers come from the States.
Yeah, that's where a lot of people, like,
statistically,
the big headlines, like,
Yes.
the heavy hitters,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah.
So yeah, it was just in a pig farm in a rural area in Canada, and it's like
What time frame was this?
It would have been like 2000. Like
he
it's
got
not
arrested in 2002.
he was
But
arrested.
he was doing
Not
this.
completely outdated.
No,
from, like,
it's not
DNA
that long
testing and stuff
ago.
like that. Just
No.
kind of speaks to, like, the lack of care to, like, whether it be missing Indigenous women and things like that, and also sex workers. Because I mean, obviously, the society's view on that is that your life is not worth.
Yeah, if
anything.
you're addicted to drugs and you're
Things like-
working on the
exactly,
streets, then
yeah.
you're worthless. And
Right.
that's that is how he got away with it for so long, unfortunately. Because I could tell you, if it was privileged male men getting murdered, if somebody would have caught on by the second one, if not the first.
I was gonna say,
Right.
yeah. As soon as two guys from Bay Street go missing,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah.
I think there's so many elements to that one because it's the marginalized people, the women, of the
And
Lower
there's
East
still a lot
Side.
of these issues that go on to this day.
Oh,
too,
100%.
right? So-
Yeah.
It's still happening. It's happening right now in Manitoba with
Yeah.
Indigenous women who are missing, and they were thrown in a landfill, but for some reason the government just doesn't want to spend the money to find them.
Yeah, it's really disgusting.
And yeah, it is. So that's another thing that we do try to, as much as we can, talk about victims who are victimized because of the color of their skin or the situation that they were in their life, their socioeconomic status, and especially because we are white, so we have a lot of privilege, and it's really, so we are the ones that should be sort of spreading awareness, and we have a lot of ears that will listen, and so that's one part that we always try to, make sure that we aren't just covering the John Benet Ramseys, because they've been all over the news. Everybody knows that case, and the Casey Anthony's, right? So that's one thing that's really important to us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there like outside of, obviously, as what we've previously spoken of, but is there another case that, like, you're really excited to kind of cover?
There's definitely, we have a huge list of case requests.
There's literally an unlimited amount.
Unlimited, but yeah, there's a few ones that are really high on our list. Jodi Arias.
I think who else?
Have you looked at any, like, local ones?
They covered Paula Gallant's case.
Oh, they did. Okay, okay. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, okay. I wasn't,
Yeah, we did that one fairly recently.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, like, big name ones that we haven't covered. We haven't covered.
I don't know why my mind is blanking.
I don't know either.
I was trying to think of the dad who killed his wife and kids in the States.
Oh, Chris Watts.
Oh,
yeah.
that's
Yes.
a crazy
Yeah,
story.
that one's really disturbing.
There's a couple kind of really messed up ones that have come out of Quebec too. Like, my wife's from Quebec, so she kind of keeps me informed. Of all this stuff. There's, like, some couple messed up ones where, like, parents killing their kids and things like that.
Yeah.
Kinda come out of it.
Yeah,
Just
we
kinda,
did
like, shake your head.
cover. We covered. Brain is not braining. We're both pregnant people. Cut us some slack.
A little bit of pregnant brain going on. That's okay.
It's a real thing.
It is a real thing.
Do we cover a case out of Quebec?
Well, I mean, I do know you covered Luca Magnotta.
Yes.
I knew that one.
Right. And we did cover.
Which is a pretty messed up case.
We did cover, the couple that were in Ontario that now she lives in Quebec.
Carla Magnotta. Or Carla Magnotta. Jesus Christ.
Well, Paul Bernardo.
Paul Bernardo.
Carla
and
Homolka.
Carla
Yeah,
Homolka.
I mean, yeah, she's
And
out
she
now.
lives in
She's
Quebec
out
now.
Yes,
yeah, living her
Yeah,
life.
that's what made me think of
But
that.
Paul Bernardo, I think, I don't think he'll ever get out.
Hopefully
It's funny because he
not.
actually just he applied to. I think pretty sure Paul Bernardo applied to go from maximum to minimum, or
He
medium
did.
or something
Yeah,
like that.
he did.
And a lot of people were like, no, never should happen. But I was like, you know what?
Put him in Gen Pop, man.
Exactly. I'm saying the same thing. I'm like, put him in Gen Pop because the fact everyone's like, oh, he doesn't deserve whatever. It's like, yeah, but you like. I mean, I've never spent a day in prison, but obviously being in general, like, population is far more scary than being locked in your cell, being fed your 3 meals. Yeah, boredom sets in, but boredom is also a privilege.
But
when someone could,
they're getting more
Right.
than we think. They're getting access to more than we know,
Right.
even when they're segregated.
Yeah.
Which we talk about this a lot because we always get into the discussion about death penalty or not.
right?
Yeah.
And
which is a very interesting.
Yes, it is.
we could
Very
go on forever.
controversial.
We could,
Yeah.
And so essentially, there are just so many layers that go into death penalty or not. But for me, when I think about it, I feel, if, like in Paul Bernardo's case, if there is no doubt, like there's not a single doubt that he did this. It's on video. Like he's a massive piece of shit. If he goes back out into the community, he's gonna kill people.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so why does he get the right to even be alive and have the ability to feel happiness ever? So that's what I sort of think of. But then I sort of get, well, if they're, there are more layers to that because some people are just convicted and they didn't do it. So
there is that, like there's Hurricane Carter's,
Yes.
Hurricane Carter's case and all that
Right.
stuff. I mean, now it's less likely to happen because we have so much more testing and all that stuff. That being said, there's even still, there's a part of me that it's like, even if we killed these people who are like absolute monsters, I'm kind of like, getting off a little easy.
Yeah.
It's like,
I see that.
yeah,
point of view,
I
too.
totally see
I
that
see
too.
both sides of
I
that,
do,
too.
for
it's like,
sure.
I kind of feel like they should suffer a little bit.
Yes.
Maybe like, don't give them a mattress. They sleep on a bed of nails.
And
for a little
honestly,
bit.
like
don't know.
I feel like a lot of people, like criminals, serial killers who know that they're going to be jailed for a long time, they just find a way to kill themselves because
That's true, too.
they're like, I'm not doing
Right.
this. So yeah, almost like keeping them in jail for a life sentence is absolute mental torture to them, right? So
It is.
Yeah.
It can be, I don't know. There's just like different forms of justice. Sometimes I do just
Yeah.
wish that they were thrown into the general population, and
Yeah, I do too. Like, let's let them.
they need a taste of their own medicine.
Yeah.
They shouldn't
That
be
fear.
protected.
The
right?
fear
Like,
and the knowing that,
Yeah.
you're walking in there, all these other guys, people know what you did. They know who you are.
Yeah.
And
And you know what? Being the number one guy is
Let 'em go.
not always a good thing. Like people want to take a shot at the number one guy.
That's
And
right.
when you're Paul Bernardo and the people that you raped and sexually abused and tortured and killed were kids,
Right.
oh, you're getting
yeah.
messed up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I know an eye for an eye makes the world go blind, but when it comes to children, like if you are torturing and murdering children,
Yeah.
it's just a different level.
it's completely
It's a
different.
different kind of
It's completely
monster.
different. It really, really is.
Yeah.
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 No, that's the thing. So I think there is a fine line. I think there's probably a happy medium where we could, find it's like, you know what?
Everyone's got a very strong opinion on it.
Yeah.
We actually got a hate email
oh, did you?
from, I was just trying to search it up. I'm going to look for it.
Yeah, that's right. Because you guys probably get like a little bit
Yeah,
of
I was going to ask
controversy
that
there.
too.
Honestly, sometimes, and
It's not that much.
on Instagram, the odd time, then we might get, it's just really hard in today's society to make sure that you're saying everything properly. And we always try our best to do that.
Right. People will reach out more, try to like correct or educate us
And
on
we
like how they think
so
something
appreciate
should
that.
be. Right.
Yes. But there are some people who just take it like a little bit too far. And in terms of, like where we really, you can tell that we're hyper aware of the way we say things and we're trying to be respectful. So the people that reach out and say like, hey, instead of saying schizophrenic, you should say with schizophrenia, we're like, amazing. Thank you for telling us that.
Right.
But then there are some people who, they'll nitpick everything we do and, we're not sharing about this enough. And like, why aren't you posting about this? And, oh, I guess you're not getting to this case because it's not important to you and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, okay.
But this piece of hate mail that we got,
Is that the
Does
one?
this one take the cake?
this one is about Carla Homolka.
Yes.
That being said, you can't possibly satisfy everybody.
No, you're never going to.
You both have day jobs.
Yes.
So like it's not like you're just sitting here banging out 10-hour days worth of research and podcasts kind of thing.
And
right?
so most people are understanding because they know that this isn't the only thing that we do. But some people will be like, oh, I'm leaving. You don't upload enough. Like, where are you?
Yeah.
And I mean, I get it. It's annoying, but also like,
This
send
is
me
a passion
paycheck, bro.
project for you guys.
Right.
It's your-
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think people do have a misconception of, they think if you're in podcasting, and because we do have a relatively large following, they probably think that we're making money off this. And like the ads that we do, we have ads now, and we might make $20 each a month. Maybe.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's kind of funny because we're just entering like in sponsorships and stuff like that
Right.
now. And I mean, unless you're like, huge,
Right.
you're really not making anything.
No, you don't get into podcasting.
And it's
to-
harder in Canada
rich.
as well.
And it's harder in Canada.
because we
Yeah.
actually are paired with a company called Audio Boom, and we had signed a contract with them. And essentially, once you reach a certain amount of listeners per month on episodes, we could get the sponsored content where brands are actually sending us items for us to test, and then we do the ads, because right now it's
Okay.
just auto played ads.
Right.
And so we signed with them right away, and the goal was 10,000 listens per month. And within like a pretty quick amount of time, we were reaching that. And so when we sort of reached back out to say like, hey, we'd like to switch to these ads now, they're like, whoops, we didn't know that you were in Canada. We actually need you to meet a higher quota. Maybe you should go with somebody else.
Yeah.
So that was kind of tough for
Canadian
us.
dollars compared to the US.
That's right.
Listens
Into
compared to-
listeners.
Yes.
But we're not in it for that reason.
No,
right?
yeah.
Like
No.
we do it truly because we enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and it does take a lot of work. It takes a lot of time out of our days, and we have a lot of distractions that we have to deal with. So,
Right.
but yeah, most people are we have a lot of supporters, right? Like people are very, very kind. You do
Like,
get the odd
so
asshole,
kind.
but like,
I mean, that's just life.
Well, the fact that you guys,
everyone's always going to have that one person who you just can't please, and they just want to be negative.
And if it gets to that point, if it's a person that we don't like the way that they're treating us, or they just sort of have a sense of entitlement, then we're like, you know what? You don't need to be in my space, and we block them.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like I'm like my attitude for a lot of things is like, like whether it be social media or whatever, it's just like, I'm not an airport. You don't need to announce your departure. Just stop listening.
Oh, but people
you don't need to be rude
Right.
on your exit, right?
Yeah.
Man.
just peace out
the
quietly.
entitlement. That's
So you have some hate mail for us.
I do.
Yeah. You found it.
Trigger warning for the language. Do you swear on your podcast?
We can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I already said a couple swear words.
I've been trying not to, but it's hard.
You can bleep this. I'll spell it out for the one word because it's really awful. You effing CUNTs.
Ooh,
Start strong.
Yeah.
holy.
Seem to have it out for Carla Homolka. Let's sidebar for people who don't know who she is. She literally sexually assaulted, raped, and killed her own sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not so much Paul when he was clearly culpable in the case. Worry about your own effing kids and don't worry about Carla's kids. She paid her debt to society, you jealous bitchs.
Wow.
Oh, did she?
Apparently. The
like
few
it's
years
just
that she did.
shit like that I'm like, okay, you're clearly trying to get a rise, because who the hell actually thinks like that? Like
Right.
So I'm like, don't even respond
we
to
don't
that.
answer.
Don't
Yeah,
even
well, I
respond
wouldn't.
to
Yeah,
that.
like who defends like mass murderers?
Exactly.
Yeah, and she took. Yeah, she was a big part of her sister.
lured people in.
I
She
believe she
100%
was the
did.
mastermind in the murdering component.
Yeah,
of
a
it.
lot of people do,
So-
and
we
agree.
did not give Paul a pass on that episode at
mean,
all.
I
So I
really
really
didn't.
don't know what that person is
How
talking
could
about.
you give
but
him a pass?
No.
Anyways, it's,
Yeah.
just stuff like, I honestly laugh at stuff like that, because I'm like, that is like,
It brings you down to earth when you hear people say that, because you're just like, okay, if there's people like this that exist, like you're just never gonna make everybody
No.
happy. And like this is the cause you're fighting for, is the woman that was raping and murdering children. That's what you're gonna go out on the internet and fight for. Let's find a better cause.
Yeah, like that's
Right.
literally the equivalent of someone like, hey, Hitler's not so bad. He was great for the economy.
Yeah, it's like,
yeah.
no.
basically, right?
It's like, no, just
you just can't
so
even,
No,
I
you're-
can't humor that.
A
You
monster
can't
is a
stoop
monster.
to that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people will just always have an opinion, and you'll never make everybody happy. So, and that comes also with like, we have lots of reviews on Apple Podcasts, and you'll have people who will say like, this is the best podcast I've ever listened to, and I love it, and blah, blah, blah. And then you'll have people that are just like, shut up, we don't want to hear your opinion. And like, it's like, it's a
Don't
podcast.
listen to
Right.
the podcast.
It's like a TV show. Like I know a ton of people who love
Yeah.
watching The Office. I don't love watching The Office. Is it funny? I'm sure it is. I just don't really. It's
not your
not
thing.
my
Now,
genre.
Yeah.
now I'm personally offended. That's it.
You're like, get out, get out.
But if you don't like it, you just,
I just
go,
don't
okay,
watch
well,
it.
I'm just gonna find something new.
It's like I just don't watch the show. I'm sure it's great. It's just not for me.
Game of Thrones, same story. I could not get into that to save
Game
my
of
life.
Thrones,
Game of
yes.
Thrones,
Game of
yeah.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
So, but people nowadays, it's like, if this isn't exactly what I want, like, I'm going to go up in arms about it. And
they think almost that we're not real human beings, that we just live behind a microphone, and that our only purpose is to please their need of entertainment.
I think that's a common problem in a lot of things, not just social media, but obviously heavily in social media. But I mean, also in like my work life thing. Like, I was always a big fan. If I had to work with someone like quite often, or my team had to work with someone quite often, I'd bring that person in at least once a month, and they could see them, because it's really hard to, insult someone or kind of talk down to somebody if you see them as people.
In person.
If it's always just a voice on the other side of the phone, or it's just letters on the other side of an email or social media, or whatever, it's so easy to just talk shit to them. Right.
Yep.
And to like, basically it's like, that's not a human. That's just something, a name on the other side of something. Right.
Yep.
So I think that's a huge issue with today that we need to kind of work on.
It's massive, but it's never going to get better. And you have, you have all these forums where it's just designed for people to be anonymous.
Yes.
And when you're anonymous,
you can literally make up a name if you want, right?
Yeah. When you're anonymous and you're never going to be held accountable for your actions, you're going to say and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So this person that emailed me from a fake email account advocating for a child murderer, nobody will ever know who they are. And they could just be someone that is like, they could work in an elementary school and like la-di-da, like it's just
could literally be your next door neighbor.
They could.
Right.
And so that's a scary thing about the internet. And so you kind of have to, like, I don't have a very tough skin, and it's taken a while, probably up until like the last little bit, that if I read a feedback that's negative, for me to be able to brush it off, because I'm also a people pleaser.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, they didn't like it, or, somebody said we sound desensitized. And I mean, it's not like we're not a theatrical podcast. We're not like acting and crying.
What do you want from me?
Just the claims are a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's like, if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for someone to like gasp and cry and scream, like, you should probably watch a reenactment documentary of this case.
Right.
But we've started to just be like, oh my God, this is hilarious. Like, people will be like, oh, one of the girls sounds like a Valley girl, and she doesn't add anything to the conversation, and how many different ways can you sound surprised? And it's just like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, just move on. It's
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I've gotten a lot better at that. And she's just a kind of, I don't give a crap person. So she's helped me with that a lot. Because
I just feel like I can't relate to people like that.
No.
So I'm like, I don't have time to get on that level. Right?
No,
like,
it's not worth your energy.
No,
it's
it's really not.
Yeah.
No.
And nor do I care about pleasing people like that, honestly.
No.
Like, so,
because you probably never will anyway.
No.
If you fixed A and B, they're going to come up with C.
Oh,
so
of course. Yeah.
you're going to have those people. So you feel like you have a bit more of a thicker skin.
Yes.
These
Oh my
days.
gosh. Yeah. I'm way better. And when you become a parent too, it sort of gets a little better too, because you want them to be that way. So you're like, oh, I have to be that way too.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I've definitely gotten better. Still not perfect with it, but hopefully I'll one day just be able to read it and be like, whatever.
yeah.
Well, I think it's great. Like, you guys were only out a year when you got the silver for the Coast Award.
Yep.
And then you guys were nominated this year, and we'll find out next month.
We will.
Right?
Yeah, we're
The show will
hopeful.
air on November 30th, I think.
Okay.
November 30th?
Yeah, I think we might know by then, eh? If you
Maybe,
wanna know.
so.
Oh, for when
That being
this
said,
when this
I
one
hope you
comes
guys,
out.
I hope you guys take the gold this year. But I
Me
hope you
too.
take silver next year, because I hope AP takes gold
That's
the year
fair.
after that.
That's fair.
Little friendly competition.
Little friendly competition. But you know what? Honestly, I think we covered a lot there, and honestly, it went in a lot of different ways than I thought it was really even going to.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
honestly, thank you so much for your time. I know we're here on the weekend, and we're taking time away from your families and stuff like that. So I really, really appreciate you guys taking time to come out and talk to us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on. I was so excited to have you guys on because, I'm a huge fan, and I've known Kristen for a little bit. And this was fun for me to do too.
Yay, I'm so glad.
And for Coco, who's under the
And
table
for
right
Coco.
now, to speak on a lead.
So we'll I guess what we do is we'll end on a cheers as well.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much. And so listen
Thanks,
to Momicide.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.